All right, now that we've looked at how light works, quality of light, contrast and shadows, and types of light in terms of hard light versus soft light, now we're going to take a look at lighting styles and also color. We'll get to color in just a minute. All right, when it comes to lighting, there are three main styles. You have ambient, you have practical, and you have motivational. Now, motivational is not what you think, I guarantee it. Let's start with ambient. Ambient light means the light that is more or less already present in a scene, what you would expect for a scene, um, without before any real lighting is added. Ambient light is just kind of like the light that hangs in space. It's uniform, no real emphasis on shadow. Ambient usually refers to natural light, either outdoors or coming through windows. It can be, but it can also mean artificial lights, such as normal room lights. A scene predominantly lit with ambient light is typical of television sitcoms, as we're looking at here, where if you're looking at the scene, there's, it's, yes, there are light parts, and there are light parts over here and over here, but then there are dark parts over here. But overall, it's just fairly uniform lighting. Yes, they are using the concept of 3 point in these shots, but it's fairly uniform. Everywhere they go, there's nothing really dramatic about it. It's just the scene is filled with light. Now, practical lights are different. When you're lighting with a practical light, that's where you have to be really careful about it. When you're lighting with a practical light, the light is coming from a natural light source within the shot, such as a lamp or the sun. But the big thing with a practical light is it has to be coming from within the shot. If it's not seen, if you don't see the practical in the scene, in that shot, you're not lighting with a practical, or at least as far as the audience can tell. Outside of using the sun, it's very rare to find a scene lit only with practical lights, because usually a practical light is way too dim. In this case, what we're seeing here with these candles, if you were just using those three candles to light the subject, they would be way, way, way too dim. A candle is just not bright enough for video cameras. The human eye is much more sensitive to light than the best of the cameras out there. And now we're not talking night vision, things like that. And so if you want to have something naturally lit, you need to have a practical is usually not the way you want to go, unless of course you are talking about the sun, because the sun is way bright. Now the scene that we're showing here is from a movie called Barry Lyndon. Now this is kind of, people will talk about like, oh well, this whole film was actually shot with natural light. This film is a brilliant film by Stanley Kubrick, and it's called Barry Lyndon. But it was not just shot with those three candles. However, it was filmed by candlelight. But Kubrick had Kodak make very sensitive film, and also just off camera he had literally about 600 candles to 1,000 candles lit just off frame with mirrors on them to supplement these three candles. But he was so important to him because he was a perfectionist in every way to be able to match the look of what a candle gives for lighting. So they actually were lit with candle light, but not just those three candles. So those three candles were supplemented. Now, when you are supplementing a practical or an implied practical in a scene, that is when you have motivational lighting. Motivational lighting is a style of lighting in which the light sources imitate existing sources, such as lamps or windows. So with motivational light, what you're trying to do is lights that are not on the scene, that are just outside that frame that our audience cannot see, are actually lighting our source, or our subject rather. But they're made to look like they are actually the practicals in the scene, or motivated by possible practical in the scene, like maybe an open window has light coming through it, or a street light coming through the window. You don't see the street light, but it's implied that there is a street light out there, and you're lighting it, though not with a street light, you're lighting it with your own professional lighting equipment. This image here sort of shows a really good example. Most movie lighting is motivational in one way or another. If you look at this image here, the scene here, the you have, it's a fake set. You got the walls, the fake walls over here, and you have bright lights up here that are shining through a fake window to be able to make it look like our subjects are being lit. You also have other lights coming down from above that are giving basically a 3-point setup for our subjects, and they're implying that our idea that they are being lit is by a lamp that's just above their heads in the frame is motivated by the direction the light's coming from. That's where motivation comes from. A lot of people get confused with motivational light, thinking that you're trying to create a mood with the lighting. Motivational light is not mood lighting. Motivational light means that the source of light in a shot is motivated. Our logic of where that light is coming from is motivated by a practical or an implied other light source, such as an open window, or you may not see a lamp over somebody's head, but you suspect that it's there because of the way the light hits them. Our logic is motivated in those scenes, those situations. That's what motivational light is about. As I said, most movie lighting is motivational. Again, in the scene, you see in the subject here, this is what our frame sees right here. And we have, it's hard to see behind the person here on the right, but there is a light with a very soft light coming through, shining on our subject, generating that light on her face. Now we are motivated into thinking that that light is coming from this window. But in all reality, the light source is actually coming from a soft light off to the side, lighting her face. All right, now, with that in mind, we have not talked about color. And color, when you're talking about light, is incredibly important. The first thing you need to understand about light is that what we perceive as white light is actually a mixture of all colors put together. If you've ever taken a physics class in high school, if it talked about, if you used a prism, you see a rainbow. White light, what we perceive as white, is actually all colors put together. The whole Roy G. Biv color spectrum put together is white light. However, the world does not give us a perfect mix of white light, no matter where you go. And when you are filming, you'll be chasing sort of two ends of the spectrum. You'll be chasing the one area which is warm or cool. Now, warm light you can think of in terms of firelight or candlelight or even incandescent light bulb light, while cool light will generally be considered the sun, because the sun, you get the blue sky, those rich blues in the blue sky tend to actually make things seem more blue, while tungsten light, which is made from heating up a filament, you got heat, you got hot, that's red glowing embers, or candlelight, again, red fire glowing, it's more of a warm type light. And as filmmakers, we are playing with these two ends of the color spectrum of white light. You have white light that leans towards the warms, leans towards the reds and the oranges, or you have white light that leans towards the cools and the blues. And both of them will set a mood, but they're also different lights will emit different color lights, and you have to be cognizant of how that goes. If you look at this in this image, this wall behind these two lights is a white, quote-unquote, white wall. You shine the warm light on it and you get this sort of amber yellowish glow. You shine the white light on that side, you get that sort of light blue-ish look to it. So you have to be careful of what light sources you're using, because they will affect, and you don't necessarily want to mix them because they can be some bad results. Now, you may be wondering, like, no, hey, I've been outside. How come you're saying daylight's blue? Why doesn't it look blue to me? Well, the reason why is because our brains adjust to this, because our brains want us to see things in a specific way. Our brains want us to see white. And to test this, if you've ever put on as a kid or as an adult, if you get like a pair of green tinted sunglasses or orange tinted sunglasses or purple tinted sunglasses, when you put those sunglasses on, everything looks pink or purple or orange or whatever. But I guarantee you, within about a minute, everything's going to look normal again. And it's because your brain doesn't want things to be tinted. Your brain is going, whoa, 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 whoa. I need to see things a certain way, and your brain will adjust the way you see color. Your brain and your eye will adjust the way you see color to make it look the way your brain thinks the world should look. If you don't believe me about the sky being, looking a little bit blue, go outside sometime on a bright sunny day, go into an overhang, and or in the shade, close your eyes for about a minute, then open your eyes up, and everything will have a light blue tint to it. All right, now talk a lot about how the eyes will adjust. Our camera is not that smart. A camera cannot do this. So we must tell the camera what kind of light we are working with. Are we dealing with a blue situation? Then our camera will adjust it to make it look normal. You tell your camera we're dealing in the blue light spectrum. You tell your camera you're dealing in the warm white spectrum. So our eyes and our brains are smart. Cameras aren't. You have to tell them what situation you're going into. To do this, we measure light and its color by its color temperature, and it's measured in degrees Kelvin. Now, the video I posted on Filmmaker IQ on the history of color temperature goes details this very well where this came from. But suffice it to say, this list here shows you more or less what you're looking at, where you're at 7200 degrees Kelvin as a candle, on up to tungsten light, which is 32 degrees 100 Kelvin, that's the magic number you're chasing most of the time, because most studio lights are 3200 degrees Kelvin. You got moonlight at 4100, and then you got the clear midday, which is 5600 degrees Kelvin. And we'll talk about that in a minute, because 32 and 56 are the two magic numbers. They are the numbers that most fixtures, light fixtures, can come in. And then you have varying other degrees. But light is measured in degrees Kelvin. Hint, hint, nudge, nudge. There might be a question on this. Light is always measured in degrees Kelvin. And the two biggies are 32 and 3200 degrees Kelvin and 5600 degrees Kelvin. Remember this. We'll be talking more about this here as we move along. As I said, the two most common color temperatures we work with are 32 degrees 100 Kelvin and 5600 degrees Kelvin. 3200 is considered tungsten. Tungsten is incandescent light, like you come from a light bulb, or more commonly what you would get in a studio light fixture. And then 5600 degrees Kelvin is considered daylight color temperature. 32 is going to be the warmer color, and then daylight is going to be the cooler color. And these are things that you need to be thinking about when you're looking at your lights. If you're going to be lighting outside in bright daylight, but you think you still need a little bit more light, well, you're probably going to want a 5600 degrees Kelvin light, because that will make your subject look more natural. If you're inside, though, you're not going to want the 5600 degrees Kelvin. You're going to want the 32. We'll talk more about this, and we get into camera classes. This will be covered in every day. But these are the two temperatures that, as lighting designers, lighting directors, you're chasing your entire career. What one am I going to use, and where do I use it? Is it going to be 32 or 56? Those are some of your first questions you need to be thinking about when you're lighting a scene, or choosing which light sources to use to light a scene. Lights used in film and television are typically designed to be either tungsten or daylight balanced, as I said. This Arri light right here, 300 watt Arri light, is a lower to mid-range power tungsten light, while this light here, which is called an HMI, I would guess this is about a 400 HMI, and by the way, 400 HMI lights are much more powerful actually than the 300 watt tungsten, the way it's nature of the beast, but we'll talk about that at a different time. But the HMIs are daylight balanced. So the tungsten is 3200 degrees Kelvin, And then the HMI is 56 Kelvin. Again, when you're choosing lights, these are all factors you need to decide. Tungsten lights are the most common, but they do require a lot of power. And they are always balanced to 3200 degrees Kelvin. There is a class of lights called HMIs, like I just said. HMIs are always daylight balanced, which is 5600 degrees Kelvin, as I said. They also have to use a ballast, which is a separate box. Well, sometimes it's mounted on the camera, but more times than not, the ballast is a separate box. And the ballast regulates the power, and it actually allows you to have a much brighter light using less power. If the 300 watt light is about 3 times as bright as your common light bulb used in your living room, a 400 watt HMI is actually close to the equivalent of a 1000 watt light. So just things to think about. Yeah, a lot more bang for your buck with power on HMIs, and they're always daylight balanced. So these are all factors you have to think about. Then we showed you in the last video Kino flows. And now Kino flows are a little unique in that while the tungsten and the HMIs are both hard light sources that can be made soft with using soft boxes and such, Kino flows, as we know from the last video, are always soft. However, a Kino flow, they just use fluorescent bulbs, and you can buy 3200 degree bulbs, and you can also buy 5600 degree bulbs, and so they can be either. So you can trade off, and if you want to mix a 5600 degree K Kino with a HMI, you can, or however you want to do it. So Kino flows are a little bit more versatile in that, and to be honest, they actually do sell bulbs in many other degrees Kelvin, in case you're going for a certain kind of a lighting effect. But in general, you either will be having 3200 degree bulbs or you'll be having 5600 degree bulbs in your Kino flows. Now also Kino flows that we talked about before, they too require a lot less power. The other benefits that you get with Kinos is they're much cooler. They don't get hot because HMIs and tungstens, you can fry an egg on them. But they're not quite as bright as the HMIs or sometimes the tungstens as well. Last but not least, I did want to touch on there are some new fixtures out there that are LEDs, light emitting diodes. These fixtures have very little energy, very little draw. You can actually, I personally own a LED light that kicks out about as much as a 300 watt HMI that I can run off of a camera battery for 4 hours. So they're very bright and they're very cool. And the nice thing about them is that some of them allow you to literally dial on the light source itself to any color temperature you want to get, so that you don't have to worry about changing bulbs, bringing bulbs. So there's a lot of pluses to them. However, at the moment, they are very expensive. But a lot of people think that this is the way lighting is going to go because they're cheaper, they use less power, and they're cool. You don't have to worry about people frying an egg. And that's it. Thank you very much.